Hello, everybody out there in UCY Radio Land. This is Chuck Horton along with Drew Lamlin bringing you another edition of Double Cross Radio as we secede, even if it's only in mind, from the state and become free and independent individuals, sovereign citizens, as it were, in the state of Jefferson, or the Republic of Jefferson as we now know it. Drew, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chuck. How's it going?
I have had just a magical day. It was just
magical.
It's one of those days where, the time just rushes by real fast because you're just so involved and everything. Nothing is interrupting your thinking. And, I was able to eat when I was hungry. And every time I'd go and look for something on the internet, I'd find it right away. And everything I read was interesting. And I found a lot of things to share on our page. I probably shared way too much stuff on our people who are liked our page probably got way more stuff in their email than they were planning on today. So I've just had all sorts of interesting things to share with people. But we have a really interesting show tonight for all you people who are here. And just as a teaser to get everybody committed to staying tuned in, we're going to be covering a bombshell that actually was aired last Thursday, and we didn't hear it until after our show was off the air. Max Keiser on the Alex Jones Show talking about CIA insider trading prior to the 9/11 disaster. And that's just huge news. We'll get into that in a little bit and explain why it's huge news, because it's been alleged prior to Max Keiser talking about this, and why this makes it even a bigger story than it was before, and why it kind of confirms what other people were alleging, and it's big. But in the meantime, we have a couple of local matters to take care of. This is kind of a surprise for Drew, so maybe I can we'll see how good he is at impromptu conversation, which I can tell you from my own experience, he's really good. He'll have lots to say about this. Earlier today, or it was way early in the morning, like about 7 a.m. this morning, we posted on our Facebook page about a local meeting that's going to happen next April 8th in the Medford Library. By the way, our Medford Library, I have never been in the part that has books, but I've been in this room about a dozen times, and I'm glad they put that room there because it's well used. It's probably the most visited room in that whole library. They need about 3 or 4 of those rooms and a little less room taken up with books, because you could store all the books in that library in a computer that would fit on my desk. So, well, that's how that goes. Anyway, April 8th, Medford Library, 6:30 p.m. They're going to have a county commissioner candidate forum. And, they're going to have the 2 candidates for position number 1. It'd be Rick Dyer and Henry Marlowe, and the 2 candidates for position number 3, that's Colleen Roberts and Joe LaCoonzie. These are all the Republican candidates. I don't think any of the Democrat candidates are running in the primary because they're, or if they are running, I'm not sure how this works exactly, but I don't think there's any Democrats that are running at this time, or if they are, they don't have to go through the primary process because they're the only ones running for those positions. Anyway, enough of that. They're going to be there, and about a week and a half ago, I went to a sheriff's forum that was at that same venue, and they asked questions of it. And I wasn't really prepared. I kind of went there at the last minute. I only had a day or so to think about it. I really didn't have that many questions for them, and I thought, the people asked some pretty good questions. I'm not going to say that there weren't good questions asked, but afterwards, I had a lot more questions than I did before I went. And so I wanted those of you who are local listeners and people who are in Jackson County that might be listening to this on a podcast, I want you to get a piece of, or just carry a pad of paper and a pen with you wherever you go. And between now and Tuesday, every time you have a thought of a question that you might want to ask one of these people or have them answer, either, I think all 4 of them should probably answer if it's a good question, but just to know where these people stand on various issues that are important to you, then you should just jot them down so you don't forget them. And then as you have time, maybe an hour or two before you go to attend, maybe you could craft the questions a little bit better so they sound good. And it doesn't sound like you're trying to promote a point of view, or, you don't want to make it sound like a push-pull question. You want to make it sound like something that you really want to know what their stand is on something. And the county commissioners I think they're probably they're probably not going to be able to do things about schools. Probably not going to be able to do things about City of Medford issues. So, don't get too tied up in that. But they can do things about like opening up our forests again and getting people to get back to work in the woods and harvesting timber and maybe get a sawmill or something started up again, so we have some more employment for the people here. We have a very high rate of employment in Jackson County, despite what the official statistics say. There's a lot of people not working, and a lot of them are young people that could probably these kinds of jobs don't require a lot of training and experience. They just require a little bit of safety and common sense. They're outdoors and they're kind of burn up some of their energy. A lot of them pay well enough that you could support a family on one income. Maybe not in a great lifestyle, but you don't have to have both parents working. It'd be a choice, not a necessity. So those kinds of things are important to me. I think that's something that I was going to ask, is something about. We already have the example that's been given out in this program that was brought to us by Loma and Ray from up in Roseburg area. They came down and talked to us about the county in Arizona. I think was it Apache County?
That's Apache County.
It was Apache County, okay. And how they were able to take control of some of these lands. And there's a lot of things that can be done. As they point out, you can log back 300 feet on either side of a road as a fire prevention measure. Man, we have a lot of roads in Jackson County that have trees right up to the edge of the road. Logging back 300 feet would create a lot of timber for those mills to process for a year or two. It would take just to do that. In the meantime, we could be lining up land that we could start to control the business on, and we could start to line up timber sales and providing income and revenue for the county, at the same time jobs for the people that are just standing around in the park looking for drugs and drinking booze. There's a lot of stuff out there, and these kinds of jobs are kind of jobs that trickle down through the economy. When those people have more money, they spend more money at the mall. They spend more money at the grocery store. They spend more money at restaurants. They spend more money at a lot of places. Right now, they're trying to figure out where they're going to get some money to spend it all. And it's going to get them off of food stamps and welfare and all sorts of other programs that kind of make you a ward of the state, even as an adult. Take away your freedoms as you become dependent on another entity for your survival. So all those things would just I think would be very, very healthy for Jackson County. That's my number one question. But there's got to be a lot more things we can ask them. And I'm really depending on all of you people out there. And I notice that Miner Dave is he's putting a lot of comments. Miner Dave has done a lot of good work in Josephine County, kind of running the So Ready out of that county, and I think he's kind of got him on the run in Jackson County too. That's a good issue that someone could ask questions about. Like, what is the county doing being mixed up with this fascist organization? This is a corporatism. They're a corporatism incorporated. I don't have anything about free markets, and I've talked to a couple of people from their organization. They don't know one thing about good economic stuff. They're just about getting public to pay more taxes into a public coffer that the private enterprise can then steal, or it doesn't steal is the right word, but it's legal theft, and they can use that to feather their nests. And yes, we should be there asking about mining, getting miners more control over their claims, and getting the Forest Service to get off their back, the BLM to get off their back, and we need to establish better policies that take into account new state laws regarding marijuana dispensaries and things like that, and so that they're not. Man, at the sheriff's forum, I was just overwhelmed with how it sounded like I was listening to a Reefer Madness movie when Sheriff Winters was talking. It's like, holy cow, this guy he drank the Kool-Aid about marijuana. It's marijuana is our big problem here. And I think that's because he gets a lot of federal funding every time he gets a marijuana bust. So,
well, Chuck, I think part of it is that because it's illegal, it's a big problem for him. If it were legal, he wouldn't have this big problem. I remember when we were listening to the National Constitutional Sheriff's Association's presentation in Josephine County, listening and a few of the other presentations from the NCSA, listening to the sheriffs talk, and most of them were just carrying on about how they needed more resources to fight the pot growers, and it's because they're trying to do their job and enforce the law. So just decriminalize it, problem solved.
Yeah, that would solve it entirely. So Drew, I gave you a couple minutes there to think of some of your own questions that you might be interested in asking.
Well, here's a question. How come small businesses always have to fill out these property tax forms every single year? Every single year you have to fill out this form, and for the most part, unless you have a whole bunch of heavy equipment or something like that, there's no tax assessed. You don't have enough stuff. Your typical small business doesn't own enough stuff, but you have to put things on there, like libraries. If you have a professional library,
I know it. They even want you to list pencils and pens.
It's absurd. They want to know your office supplies, your inventory, all this stuff, and you're supposed to do this year after year after year. Why? I don't understand it. I think businesses should stop doing it. Stop filling out the dumb thing. But this needs to stop. It's a bunch of extra paperwork. It doesn't make any sense why you have to do it. I've been dealing with this crap since I started my first business back in the late 80s, and I'm sick and tired of it. These stupid forms that come in,
It's really not,
you feel that
they collect it under the guise of property tax, but it's really a wealth tax, which I think is,
I don't understand why you should have to pay a tax on an asset that you had to buy in order to conduct business. That doesn't make any sense at all.
And it's something like your inventory of pens and pencils remains fairly static. So over the course of time, you buy them several times, just on the taxes. I know that's a dumb example because they don't spend a lot of money on pens and pencils, but it's that way with every piece of equipment and property that you own for your business.
No.
Just think of it if you were in your house, if you had to inventory your house and list all the things that you had in there and what you bought them for and how they've depreciated, and then you turn that in and you get taxed on that property. That's what they do.
Exactly.
It's just ridiculous.
No, it's completely ridiculous, and it's not fair. Just because you decided to use your tools to start a business, why do you need to inventory them for the government? It doesn't make any sense. And they usually will not levy a tax, but they still want you to report it.
Yeah. And then there's I think this is I think there's a question. I'm not sure how to say this diplomatically, so I may have to I'll write it out in as many ways as I can think of to write it. But I want to know how come Danny Jordan is the highest paid public official in the state of Oregon. He makes more money than the governor. I want to know how that happens.
Kind of reminds me of the Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah. What's so special about Danny Jordan? I don't know.
Well connected.
I guess. Yeah. So anyway, that's just some of the things I'm throwing out. There's a lot of things that are there that can talk about. There's we have issues like, the roads that are, a lot of our, in our county, a lot of the roads that go into the woods and forests, they're being blockaded, or the Forest Service, the BLM are putting chains across the roads. They don't want people driving on them. Well, it's not really a good idea. I think the road should be, this isn't federal land, it's public land, and it belongs to the people in Jackson County, and they should have the right to travel on these roads and not have to get out of their car and walk. I think they're worried about people tearing them up and then maintenance issues and things of this nature. I really think those issues are a lot smaller. They have to find a better way to solve this problem, and maybe there isn't a better way. It's just something that I would ask them about, what kind of ideas they would have to make these forest lands more accessible to the people who live here, because it's cool in the summer to go out there and hike around in the forest. It's nice. Yeah. So, I don't know if there's any other questions that you could think of.
I think some other questions should be along the lines of the county's implementation of Agenda 21.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, Agenda 21. We'll make sure we get into that. As I said before, they can't do much about how that applies to the schools, but there's certainly a lot of things that Agenda 21 it's already rolling down the pipe for the county government to choke on. They always mask it in such, really easy to swallow language, like sustainable development and quality of life and things like this. And they make things that, I don't know, they're yeah, it's how they are. It's and there's a lot of things in Agenda 21 that we could probably even give them some specific examples of things that they've done in other counties and other states. And we want to make sure that these people, these candidates, are aware of that and have some kind of an idea what they're going to be doing if they get elected. So, I'm not really that excited about, I would say, the national elections, like our congressional elections and the governor and stuff like that, because I don't really think those things are going to have that much effect on my life. But I am more concerned about county and city elections, because those people can really screw up my life. And I know those people. I make eye contact with them. I see them on the street. I can go up to them and say, "You told me you were going to do this, and why come you're not doing it?" And I can kind of hold them personally accountable. And maybe it won't do any good, but at least I'll feel better, I guess. Anyway, so that's the preliminary local stuff. I wanted to kind of get off the slate right off the bat. I wanted to make sure we didn't run out of time and the show not get to this. So remember, that's April 8th, 6:30, Medford Library. And I would like to have a huge turnout from our audience, from the people here in Jackson County that listen to our show. I'd like to have you guys turn out in the kind of numbers that you did at the Freedom Concert in Wairika. I'd like to have 25 or 30 people there that listen to this show. And I want to be really rough on these people. Because the rougher you are, then you're going to find out just what kind of person you're going to be electing. And I know, for instance, the one person of these four that I really favor, I am sure that she will be up to the challenge. And so you guys know who I'm talking about, because she's the only woman running. And she will handle it very well. I'm not sure how these other people can. I think they're going to be flustered, because if you know your facts and you write questions in such a way that they can't just give you a slimy answer that doesn't say anything, and you can hold them to that and say, "Hey, no, you have to answer the question. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know." Really hold them to it. Be tough. So that's my challenge to our audience. Be out there if you can, and bring some friends with you. So we have, we want to be the majority there. So that's the first thing. Second thing, this is going to be real short. I don't know how many in the audience have pocket constitutions, or Alex Jones, every time you order something from his site that sends you a citizen's rule book. And I had something happen last week. I was talking to one of my coworkers about our show, and I was talking to him about the Second Amendment and why it's important. And I asked him, I said, well, do you know what the Second Amendment says? And she said, no. I said, do you know what the First Amendment says? She said, no. Do you know what any of the amendments say? And she said, well, one of them is that you don't have to answer a question if they ask you. I said, well, it's not exactly what it says, but yeah, it kind of means that. So I said, well, are you ever curious about it? Didn't they talk about this in school? And she said, well, I wasn't paying much attention if they did. Which is, and to be fair, I think a lot of kids are really bored to death with the way our schools are run. So I'm not going to, hang that on them either. But I said, well, here's what the First Amendment says. And I said, it guarantees you freedom of speech. It guarantees you freedom of practicing the religion of your choice. It guarantees the freedom of the press. It guarantees the freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances. And it guarantees the freedom of association. So you can be in a group of people and not be branded as a criminal because you associate with somebody who maybe has done something wrong in their life. You have the freedom to associate with people. And for instance, I don't belong to any too many organizations, but people that belong to, let's use the Tea Party as an example. And I'll use a different example for people that don't think the Tea Party is worth protecting. But let's say you did. If the government started to look at you and come after you because you were associated with that group, that's a violation of your First Amendment rights. They put out a list of things they would look for, a checklist for potential terrorists. And they say, like a Ron Paul supporter, constitutionalist, Second Amendment supporter. That is mean you're being criminalized for your associations, and that's not legal. They cannot do that. The government someone should have hauled those people on the carpet for that, and the bureaucrats and I think it was Janet Napolitano and whoever comes up with this list, and it might even gone back to the Bush administration, whoever was in charge of that. The people that start out these things, they should be come before Congress and dismissed to their office and kicked out of government for doing this kind of a thing, because this is against our constitutional rights. That's making this point to her. You can't just say, well, it's okay if we do it against those people because we don't care about them. It's going to come back and bite you too. And so you have to stand up for everybody's rights if you want to be a free person, because if one person isn't free, nobody's free. And so I was talking to her about this during our break, and I said, well, for instance, do you know what the Second Amendment says? And she says, no. I said, well, the Second Amendment says the government shall make no law that infringes on people's right to bear arms. And then what they meant is that you have a right to protect yourself with guns or whatever. And it doesn't state the source that you need to protect yourself from, but it includes government and criminals and wild animals and whatever. And to tell somebody that they no longer have that right to protect themselves with a gun, they have to be at a disadvantage. You're telling them you're removing that right of preservation, which everybody has. It's a natural right. The government can't say you can or can't defend yourself. That isn't something that they judge. That is something that is your natural right. And the government and that's what the Constitution says, that you have that right, and they can't do anything to try and take it away. And and I asked her, do you understand what I'm talking about? She goes, yeah. I said, now, think what would happen. Right now, we have the First Amendment, Second, all the way through 10, and those are the Bill of Rights. Think what would happen to those Bill of Rights if there were no Second Amendment. So if you were doing something seditious, the government thought was seditious or maybe a problem for them, they could just come and break down your door and come into your house and beat you up and take you off to a prison somewhere. What are you going to do to stop them? They have the guns. Let's say that you're in a place like Detroit and the city goes bankrupt. They can't pay the police anymore. The police are gone. The criminals start running rampant. What are you going to do to protect yourself if you don't have a gun? And suddenly I could see the lights come on this girl's face. I mean, she's going, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. I says, the only thing that's protecting any vestige of what we used to call freedom in this country. The only thing that's keeping the government from a just total takeover right now is the Second Amendment. Because right now, if they started doing what they're doing in Connecticut all across this country, there'd be a lot of blood being spilled. And a lot of it would be police blood. The poor people that have to go and break into those houses are going to get shot coming through the door. And there are a lot of people inside the house who are probably going to be killed. And those are deaths we don't want to happen. I don't want anybody to die. It doesn't need to happen. And it's the Second Amendment that's keeping peace in this country right now. And it says, and all these different small-time Hitler dictators, they're out there trying to take away this right. And all it's going to bring is like a massive civil war or a conflict or a police state. It's not going to be good, whatever happens. I'm not a predictor of the future. But that's what's going to happen. And so I said, well, are you interested in this stuff I'm talking about? She said, yeah, I am. This is really interesting. I said, well, I'll bring you a copy. I have an extra copy of this Citizens Rule Book that Alex Jones sends out. I'll bring you a copy. I'll give it to you. I gave it to her, and she took it home. And I saw her yesterday as I was leaving. She was coming into work, and she said, thanks for that book. I was really shocked at how small it is. And I said to her, well, do you realize that they ran this country for over 100 years on the rules and regulations that are in that little pamphlet? And they did a pretty good job of it. And then the Civil War came along, and now we have bookcases and rooms full of books with laws that nobody even knows. You have to be, there's no possible way everyone could know all the rules laws that we have to abide by. She says, that's kind of where we've fallen to. But that's where we are, and I just wanted to share that story with you to tell you that there's a lot of people out there. It's pretty easy to wake them up if you just make yourself into an activist. And the person that kind of inspired me to do this is none other than Jordan Page. And just talking to him and at the Liberty concert, he just gave me so much energy to say, you have to say the things that you think are important to the people you want to convince of the superiority of your ideas. You can't just be quiet and, say little comments every now and then to kind of get your points across. You just have to stand up there and tell, like, if you're not saying the truth, they're not going to be convinced. So if you're sure you have the truth on your side, then you have to go out there and tell them. And I did, and it was, so far I'm 1 for 1. And I would just encourage all of you that, we're in for a big fight here. We have people like this idiot in the chat that's, this guy's got his head so far up his ass, he's got to open his mouth to breathe through his rear end. And people like that are out there. You're not going to have much chance or luck convincing them of the superiority of your ideas because they just aren't going to listen. But there's a lot of other good people out there that want to hear this news and that need to hear this news. And you can't be put off by the words of somebody who's just a nutcase. Someone who thinks it's funny to come on there and heckle somebody, whatever, when freedom and lives are at stake. So, enough from my rabbit ears. We'll go on to the main thing we're here for, the 9/11. And last September on was the 10th anniversary it was the 12th anniversary. We had a special on, it wasn't exactly, our show wasn't on the 11th. It was, maybe it was the day or two after. I think it was the 12th last year on September. It was the day after. But we talked about it, and we spent 2 hours, a little less than 2 hours, so we had some preliminary stuff to get rid of that day too. But we spent most of the show talking about just building number 7. And building number 7, that's kind of like a Rosetta Stone for the whole thing. I mean, that's the one thing. That's the one thing that you can't just make up a story on, because the physics doesn't change just because of one thing or another. I mean, physics is physics. you can't have a building like that just fall for over 200 feet in free fall without demolition explosions going on to reduce the supporting structure that's holding it up. And all that information was lied about and covered up. So we spent almost the whole show just talking about that and all the study that went on, the things that they said were true that couldn't possibly be true. And I thought it was a pretty good show. I mean, we're not professionals here of any kind yet, but it's one of the shows I was more proud of. And this week, I as I'm driving around doing stuff, delivering my stuff from my store, I always have something on to listen to while I'm driving around. It's good time to listen, to use my time productively and do two things at once. And I usually listen to Alex Jones because he's got an interesting show. And I think he's got a lot of good information in there. Sometimes he's kind of, once in a while I find something that I have a bone to pick with him, but it's not very often. I think he's really, I really like his show, and I like all the things that he does pretty well. I really do. Anyway, he had on Max Keiser, who's one of my favorite guests to have on my show because Max is kind of off the wall. He's funny, and he's got a lot of good financial information, and he knows economics really well. And those are things that are interesting to me. But this was on a week ago Thursday's show. That's why I didn't hear it prior to last week's show. And I'm listening to the podcast, and he starts talking about this. Do you want me to drop the bombshell right now, or do you want me to wait till later in the show? And he said, well, no, you might as well just say it now. And he comes on, and he says, there's a man who is coming out with a book called The Death of Money. And he was an eyewitness to trading rooms and where CIA agents or operatives were placing put options prior to 9/11. And then when 9/11 happened, he realized that they had to have had some kind of inside information. Now, this information was without eyewitnesses. This information was brought up. They brought this information up within a month or two of the 9/11 tragedy because they realized a lot of money had been made and lost on reinsurers, reinsurers and airlines, and some money had been made with investments in I guess you say companies that specialize in war equipment, machinery, things like that, like Halliburton, stuff like that. Anyway, and it was kind of reported. People were trying to gather information on it, and almost everything always would lead to the CIA or the FBI, and they would just kind of get they would just shut down the information highway there. It would just end, and they wouldn't be able to get any confirmation or any information, any news, anything that would lead them further. And because of this, all the mainstream channels spent very little time talking about it. It was basically relegated to alternate media, and they started to mock it as being conspiracy theories and having no factual basis, and it's just people making up things. But all these things didn't really go away. They were just stalled because they couldn't go forward. And here is this guy, he's coming out with this book. And according to Max Keiser, this information is detailed in chapter 1 of that book of how these investment bankers basically bet on their own death. That's how he put it. They were putting in put options. Now, Drew, I might let you explain put options because I might not get it right. It's a way to sell a stock short without selling it short. You reserve the option to sell it. And is that correct?
Yeah, I don't want to get into the mechanics of this, but a short sale is like betting that a stock price is going to go down.
And a put option is you're saying I'm going to well, like if you were going to take out an option to rent or to buy a house, you'd give them so much money, and then you have the option to buy the house at that price, and you can exercise the option for whatever length of time you want. And that's the agreement you make with the person who owns the house. So in the stocks, you say, I want to have an option to sell this stock at this price for a week.
Yeah, and you're not obligated to sell.
Right. You give them the money, and that's what you've purchased the ability to do that if you choose to.
Right.
And so if you choose not to, you're out the money. And if you choose to do it, you can sell it at that price. Okay, so that's called a put option. And like I said, you negotiate the time limit as you put it in. That's part of the price that they calculate for it.
Right. And so as far as shorting the stock goes, what you're doing is betting that the stock price is going to go down. And so you actually you borrow someone else's stock and then you basically sell it at the current price and buy it at the lower price. But if it doesn't go down in price, then you have to make up the difference.
Yeah, and the fact that they were doing it for a relatively small time window, it was like 7, 10, 14 days, something like that, whatever it was.
And they were doing this with airline stocks.
Airline stocks and the insurance companies, the reinsurers. Those are mostly European companies. And I'm not sure exactly what they do, but they have something of, they insure the insurance companies, I guess. They make sure that they don't end up short when they have to pay claims and things. So and
I had to say, this is a really backwards way to invest. It's not investing really at all. It's more like going to the casino. I've never shorted a stock. I've always gone long on any plays that I've made. And so it's never something that's interested me or, I never thought it was a good way to try to invest your money and make a profit. I mean, if you want to go to the casino or something like that, without taking a trip to Vegas, it's a good way to do it. But these guys have some really screwed up ways of thinking and just try to game the stocks going up and game them going down, and they're not really investing. They're manipulating stocks, playing on inside information. They're cheating basically. And it's pretty disgusting that they would game this scenario.
Yeah, it is. And the people that were doing this, and they have a program that they had devised to look for people that were planning terrorist activities. They had already known about this. They called this program, I call it PRISM. I got so many notes here. I'm pretty sure it's called PRISM or something similar to that. I was looking at the wrong page. Here we go. It's PRISM. I think it's PRISM. Anyway, they had such a narrow window of things. This would immediately trip all the red flags on all this software. So this is it's a clear indication that that this is something we ought to be on alert, because there might be something happening. I mean, and the reason this happens is not only were they putting on these put options for a short period of time, but they were like the put options on United Airlines, for example, was in a normal day they would have a few, but for United Airlines they handed out 4,744 put options compared with only 396 call options. That's when you reserve a chance to buy it at that price. And the volume was for American Airline, they had 4,516 puts. And this is 285 times the normal average for that kind of activity. This isn't 285% more, this is 285 times more. So that's like 28,500 times percent more 28,500%. That's what it means. This is incredible. And this had to be alerting them that something is going to happen. Now, what Max Kaiser was saying is that there was a guy in one of these rooms that noticed that the trades that were coming in seemed to be coming from CIA operatives or CIA sponsored organizations. And he would know who they are because this individual, the guy that wrote this book, Tim Rickert, he has had several positions of authority in intelligence work and such, and so he knows how the game is played and what's going on. He knew what was going on, so he understands that. And in one of the rooms, there was a guy there named Buzzy Krongard, A.B. Krongard. Now, this guy, after 9/11, this guy was appointed one of the executive directors of the CIA. He was in a position as the number 3 person at the CIA. This is a guy who's in a position now to stop all the inquiries into this sort of thing. Because he's in a power position that he can do that. And I'm sure he was put there to stop the investigators finding out what exactly happened. So he was there to make sure that no incriminating evidence came out of the CIA to incriminate the people in the CIA who knew about this happening. Now, whether they were involved or not, no, I mean, we can suspect, we can say yes or no, whatever, but the important thing is they knew it was going to happen, and they didn't say anything. They didn't warn anybody. They didn't call the national security. They didn't call the president. They didn't alert anybody. They knew for at least a week before it happened that it was going to happen. And in criminal activity, let's just over 3,000 people died on that day. And this makes those people that knew something was going to happen and didn't say anything, that makes them an accessory to murder 3,000 plus times. And so these people were looking at spending the rest of their life in prison or maybe the death penalty. Who knows how a crime like this gets treated. I think the emotions were running pretty high in the United States. I remember there were a lot of people with homemade signs on bed sheets hanging on their fences. I drove around Medford in those days. There were people calling to turn Afghanistan into a glass parking lot. Just drop so many bombs on it, turn all that sand into glass. That was kind of their idea, whatever. I mean, it's evident that if the blame could have been shifted away from Afghanistan to the real people who were involved here that didn't say anything, that emotional level of stuff would be probably vented pretty highly at a lot of punishment for the people involved. But it's still, a lot of those people are out walking around free. And that this insider trading that went on made them a lot of money. And some of this money, I think there's upwards of $5 million of this money that was made in this time has remained unclaimed. And that's because they thought it was just a little too hot to come in there and grab the money, because they know that that's going to eventually lead maybe a criminal investigation to their doorstep. The fact that someone would not claim up to $5 million worth of money, it's just sitting there waiting to be claimed. So anyway, here's things that happened. This is the evidence of insider trading. These are the things that have been accumulated. Now, this is a lot of the stuff I'm reading is stuff that was put out in 2001, late 2001, early 2002. It's not new information. This is stuff that we knew at the time, but we couldn't prove anything. And so it kind of, because they couldn't get any corroborating evidence, all of this stuff kind of went away. Then the big news organizations, the Fox News, CNN, the ABC, NBC, CBS, they wouldn't touch it because they couldn't get any confirmation. So we had huge surges in the purchases of put options on stocks of the two airlines used in the attack. Now, the fact that they only did it for American and United, and those are the only two planes that were involved, that kind of tell you something right there. I mean, that just, do these kind of coincidences, do they happen? I mean, we posted a story in our Facebook thing today about they uncovered evidence of voter fraud in North Carolina. They have 35,000 people there who were registered to vote and voted on the last election. 35,000 people with the identical first and last names with the same date of birth. I'll say that again. They have the same first name, they have the same last name, and they have the same date of birth. 35,000 individual and different voters. That's a pretty, they say that's an indication of voter fraud. I think that's proof. But, Darren had noted in our Facebook chat, it could happen. And then he had his tongue in his cheek when he said that. But, anyway, so that's the fact that all these put options were only on United and American. They didn't use any other airline. That's a smoking gun right there. Surges in purchases of put options on stocks of reinsurance companies expected to pay out billions to cover losses from the attack. Now I think these were all European companies. Like I said, there's like Munich Reinsurance, and I think that what they do is they insure the insurance companies. That's AIG was kind of like that, I think. Surges in purchases of put options on stocks of financial service companies hurt by the attack. That'd be like Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America. Companies that would have offices in those buildings, they would have their systems would be shut down because they did a lot of their transactions and things through there, and they knew that this destruction would be bad for them. And there's only companies who had offices in those buildings. That's another like, how come they didn't just do it for all financial companies? Huge stock surge in purchases on call options, and that would be the opposite of a put option. A call option is when you reserve a price for a future purchase, but you don't have to purchase it. You can forfeit your deposit and just say, no, I don't want to buy it now at that price. Because if the price goes down, you wouldn't want to buy it at a high price. So these call options, which were guaranteed price to purchase, that were all on weapons manufacturers. And these were people that were expected to gain from the attack. It's like Raytheon and Halliburton, companies like that. And they had huge surges in purchases of 5-year treasury notes. Okay, now how did this pay off? Well, United Airlines, the price dropped almost in half the day after 9/11. Or on the day of 9/11, actually. I think they suspended trading. And American Airlines, it was about a 1/3 drop. So those people that were executing these trades, they had reserved the right to do it at that time. They executed the options, so they were able to sell them at that price. Now all they had to do is wait a few days, and they could buy them back at the lower price for what they sold. They could finish the trade by buying back their own sale, and there they are. They've made billions of dollars. And the fact that only 5 million was left unclaimed is remarkable, because there's a lot more than 10 or 15 million. There was like billions of dollars that were made in this play. Okay, now let's see. Okay, the big losers in this were, of course, the American Airlines and United Airlines. There were also the reinsurers that we said. But I already mentioned this statistic. I want to bring this up again. The put options on the airlines surged to a phenomenal high of 285 times their average. That was reported by Bloomberg News. 285 times their average. So let's say they get like 10 a day. Well, that would mean they would get 2,850 in a day. And that usually you get more call options than you get put options. And here they're getting 396 call options for 4,744 put options. So that's like 100 to 1, more than 100 to 1. And usually it's about 0.8 put options to call options. It's less than 1 to 1. It's like 80%. They get 80% put options to the call options. It's 80% of the calls, but here it was 100 times more than 100 times more. That's just incredible. Over the 3 days before the 9/11, there were more than 25 times the previous daily average trading in Morgan Stanley put options. And these were all were set to make money if and when shares fell below $45. The reinsurers, like I said, most of those were European companies, but they estimated these companies were going to lose about $1.5 billion. So that is a huge loss for them, and it's going to be reflected in the value of their stocks, and so they're going to cash in on that as well. The winners, the people that win, well, most companies are going to see their stock price go down. Those businesses whose business was supplying the military would see dramatic increases reflecting new business they're going to see. In this particular, we're talking a lot about Raytheon. My nose itches. Raytheon makes a lot of electronic equipment that is used in airplanes, fighter jets, things like that, the radars and communications equipment and black boxes and stuff like that. Anyway, they were set to have a lot of purchase orders come pouring across their transom, and so people were doing call options for Raytheon's stock. Now, a lot of this information was gathered by a man named Michael Rupert. He was a former Los Angeles police detective, and he was a person that was involved in the Los Angeles Police Department. He was involved in doing financial crime investigations. So he was the right kind. He knew what he was looking for. He knew the kinds of things that are out there. He wasn't just a guy who got a tip and was following up on it. He knew where to look. And he even went so far as in a September 30th New York Times article, he claimed that benign explanations are turning up in the SEC's investigation. Now, this is kind of what they did with everything that happened on 9/11. There was always a theory to explain it that was not the truth, but would divert attention away from what the truth was, because the truth was going to lead you to the people who were responsible, and those people did not want that to happen. So there was all these, he called them benign explanations. This article he wrote, it blamed the activity in put options, which doesn't quantify on market pessimism, but fails to explain why the price of stocks and airlines doesn't reflect the same market pessimism. So what he's trying to say is the fact that if this was due to market pessimism, the whole market would have been going down. How come just those two airlines and a couple of stockbrokers, how come only those stocks are the ones that were attacked in this way? Well, that's why this benign explanation is just trying, people that don't know very much about the stock market, they would say, well yeah, that's the guys that are in charge of regulating the stock market, the Securities Exchange Commission, they said it was just their pessimistic attitude about the stock market. And that was the official story. It didn't make any sense. Mr. Rupert said, these benign explanations started turning up in their investigations. The fact that at this time, this was in September, that was only about 3 weeks after the event. The fact that 2.5 million of the put options remain unclaimed, and that since had risen to 5 million. that should have been something to, say there, it wasn't just pessimism in the market. So that was my first paper. The second paper was co-written by Tom Flacco and the same Michael Rupert. And this was first published in December 6, 2001. So this is only about 2 months after the event. No, 3 months. Excuse me. I can do math. 3 months. Excuse me. That's that Common Core stuff is getting to me. And this is quoting from the original article. It says, on October 9th, oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. This was reprinted in from the Wilderness Publications. And they're talking about this story. And they're giving kind of an introduction to it. On October 9th, from the Wilderness Publications broke a story on insider trading connected to the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center that sparked worldwide controversy. In that story, we reported on how Israeli Hezbollah Institute for Counterterrorism had documented that unknown individuals with accurate foreknowledge of the attacks had purchased an obvious and unusually large number of put options on United and American Airlines shortly before the attacks. So this is telling you that the alternate news people were all over this thing. But did we hear anything about it on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC? No. I think there were some links to these things in the Drudge Report, but it didn't get on the TV. And that was 13 years ago, almost 13 years ago now, 12 and a half. And the people who, there's still a lot of people today that get their news from TV. They come home from work, they turn on the TV, they sit down to eat dinner, the news comes on, they either watch it before they eat dinner, watch it while they're eating dinner, or they watch it after they eat dinner. I mean, that's kind of their whatever. And then they get done with that, they wash their dishes, they're either going to sit down and watch TV, or they're going to go play cards or read a book or whatever, but the news is kind of programmed into their daily routine. So at that point in time, there were even more people that were of that mind. The internet has grown tremendously in those 12 and a half years. There's a lot more alternative news. A lot of the ratings for the major news networks have dropped dramatically. I actually think that like MSNBC, I don't know how they're keeping the lights on, but as few people is watching that. I mean, when you consider that if you go to an airport or a bar or restaurant or something, they almost always have a cable show with the news on, and they're counting that in their Arbitron ratings. And they'll have like MSNBC on, and a lot of those, or they'll have CNN, and those TV sets that are on in those places that no one's watching, will get counted in their ratings as people are watching these shows. The places I go, I don't see anybody ever watching those shows. I mean, it's no one's paying attention to what's on there. It's just some background thing that if there's somebody there and there's only one person, they would keep their attention, so they'll stay and drink some more beer or have another drink or something. If you were to subtract all those TV sets, their ratings, they probably have their parents and their cousins and uncles watching them, and that's about it. It's really, there's hardly anybody that watches those news services. So, but 12 and a half years ago, they had sizable audiences. I mean, CNN, I think that like the program that Piers Morgan had, he inherited from, Larry something. What a time to, well, anyway, he's an iconic figure. Larry, what's his name? It probably isn't Larry either. Guy with the big glasses.
Are you talking about Larry Kudlow?
No, I'm talking about, the guy who used to do the, CNN program. Maybe it wasn't Larry. It wasn't a financial program. It was, he had a radio show too, but anyway, he's got an alternate radio show now. Been married a bunch of times. He had a engaging interviewing style. Anyway, it's not important. He's he had a 1 million+ audience for his show, and Piers Morgan has driven it down to about it's less than 200,000 people tuning into that now. For a national network, that's like in the state of Oregon, there might be 10 or 15 people watching it. I mean, Larry King, there we go. Thank you, Hunt. It's pathetic what their audience is now, but it was bigger then. There were more people watching it then, and they had more influence. But this news never made it on any of those networks. It was only in the alternative news. And I'm proud to say that our show, I consider us part of the alternative news now, because we talk about stories that nobody else talks about on the major mainstream media. They're only available in alternate news, and we try and give it the kind of research and introspection that you don't get even on the other alternative news shows that we listen to. Well, and some of them they do. I don't say we're better than everybody, but there's a lot of other networks out there besides UCY, and some of them are painfully bad. Some of them are a lot better than we are. I think that Gary Franchi's network is pretty decent, actually. In fact, I wish we were as good as Gary Franchi's network, but that's okay. I mean, he's got a lot of money invested in his, and Jules has put her heart and soul in. There's something to be said for heart and soul over just dollars. I think this is a network of love. I love being here. Anyway, one of the things that was brought out in this article is that when someone puts in a put option, the only person that's going to know the identity of the person putting in the option is going to be the investment banker that's handling the transaction. Okay, and that's really important in this story, and the information that Max Keiser was breaking. This particular brokerage was where this person was at that time. Was the giant Deutsche Bank, which owned a brokerage house, A.B. Brown or Alex Brown, and the man that was running that at the time was Buzzy Krongard. That's the name we told you about. This guy is, after 9/11, was then appointed the number 3 position at the CIA, which is just coincidentally a position powerful enough to stop all the investigations into CIA involvement in this. It's just coincidence. Kind of like that 35,000 people with the same first, last name and date of birth. I bet you some of them were men and some of them were women, and they had like Billy as their first name, so you never know. Anyway, several attempts were made to get information from the Central Intelligence Service about Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, about the September 11th stock option trading, and people knew that they had this special software. It's a Prosecutors Management Information System, which I guess they called PROMIS. I was misnaming it earlier before. This was the quote I was looking for. Anyway, they'd call them up, and they repeatedly were told, well, that would be illegal for us to do that within the United States, because they wouldn't have a warrant, so they can't admit they were doing that, because at that time we still went by the Constitution. And they would say, we only operate outside the United States. They're referring to the CIA. However, when they would ask them if they had been using it outside the United States, the person they were talking to said, I have no way of knowing what operations are being affected by assets outside the country. So they're, in a sense, were just lying that they didn't know what their own, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. And that's a lie. I mean, come on. What kind of intelligence agency hides information from its own people? Pretty dumb one. Well, anyway, extensive media reporting confirmed that the investors at Deutsche Bank, Alex Brown, and other global financial entities may have profited from prior knowledge of the attacks while purchasing disproportionate pre-attack put option contracts on targeted U.S. airlines and related reinsurance investment firms. And all of these firms suffered serious losses resulting from the September 11th attacks, and their stocks went in the tank because of this. Okay, now this was all previously reported. and I remember hearing a little bit about this, but I didn't ever hear any follow-ups. It just kind of, like I said, it got stonewalled by the CIA, and it kind of died. The story didn't have legs, and it just left. It left the headlines. But there's importance of this PROMIS software is that it is not only capable of interfacing with a wide variety of databases. So they didn't see they built it so they could, in any language, they could collate the data and they could see trends that are available from country to country to country, because they might have a terrorist organization that had people in lots of different countries, and they would be able to find keys in the things that were being said and done in different. They're spying on the world basically, and they still are, for that matter. They just call it a different name. It's not PROMIS anymore, but they could integrate the data and then modify it and use it for intelligence purposes. So this information is being put out there. They had to know that something was up. If this was the CIA working on this, they had to know something was up. Maybe they were involved, maybe they weren't. We don't know. And they're not going to tell us. But it's pretty sure they knew something was up. And this person, Tim Rickert, who wrote the book, When Money Dies, in the first chapter details, he was in the trading offices, on the trading floor. He was involved with this when it was happening. He's an eyewitness account of the CIA placing put options on these stocks. This is a crime. They had foreknowledge of a criminal act that was about to happen, and they didn't say anything. They withheld that information, which makes them an accessory to murder. And hello, Eric Holder, if you can hear me, what are you doing about this? And this goes back into the Bush administration. It goes back into the Clinton administration. I mean, there are people involved in this for the past 3 presidential administrations they should be asked to answer and call for this, because they are criminally negligent. They're criminally negligent in their investigations, their malfeasance. They may also be indicted as co-defendants because they refused to prosecute and investigate this obvious criminal activity. I think that all of you out there listening, you need to be on the phone tomorrow, calling up your representative. Elections are coming up this year. And you need to ask them, why aren't you doing something about this? And he says, I'm going to call the person running against you and ask them what they're going to do about it. And if you don't start making some noise, if you don't start giving some 1-minute speeches on the House floor, if you don't start bringing this up and making some noise about this, make sure you refer to that book. It's coming out. The book actually was published today on Kindle, and it's coming out Monday at Barnes & Noble. So you can go and get it yourself if you want to check it out before you call them up. And you can make your own notes, and you can tell them the same stuff I'm telling you tonight. This is a crime. It's been covered up. It's not the first time Eric Holder's covered up a crime. He was involved in covering up the crimes at Oklahoma City bombing. He was an assistant attorney general, and he was sent an email about having to get there and scrub the site or something to clean up the evidence, whatever. It was kind of incriminating email. And there's, he was also, up to his eyeballs in the Fast and Furious, and nothing's happened there. These people, we have to start putting them in jail. You can't just let them get away with this. Because if they get away with this, the next time it's going to be something worse. And we're not doing a good job of holding their feet to the fire at all. This is just horrible. Now, the CIA, I guess, was not the only intelligence agency involved in this. I think that some Mossad agents also made some money off of this, which indicates that Israel knew what was going on also as well. But they weren't attacked, and the people in Israel were not citizens of Israel, and it's going to be pretty hard to prosecute them. There's also indications that this Promise software, somebody made a copy of it and sold it to, they sold the software to Osama bin Laden, who was a CIA asset. Let's call it a spade, or an Arab, Mujahideen fighter, what he is. He was a CIA agent. He was trained by the CIA. He was brought to the United States, and he toured military bases and learned how to train people under the name Tim Osman. It's even suspected that he was a visitor at the White House prior to 9/11 under the name Tim Osman, which is Osama bin. Anyway, there's a indication that he was also given this stock, and he used it to figure out that something was coming down. And whether he was involved in this or not, he had the ability, even not being involved, to make a lot of money off this trades, because he knew it was going to happen too. And if he was involved in doing this and he had this software, he was involved, he would probably be able to hide his involvement. So you understand what I mean? If he could see, if he was doing stuff and it started to show up in this network, and this Promise network was flagging it, he could kind of change the way he would do it. He could test it out to see what things would set off alarm bells and which things wouldn't. I'm being attacked by my cat right now. Uh-oh. I think I have the cat is a government agent. She's coming after me to make me be quiet. Get her down. So there we go. Anyway. Let's see, where was I? So the fact that the CIA or someone in the CIA supposedly, I don't, this is just, hearsay. There's no proof on this either, but I doubt that they would tell you if they did. It's been reported that bin Laden or his family, they had a copy of this software so they could, they would be able to rig what they were doing so it wouldn't show up on the software. They could hide what they were doing or put it through different channels so it looked like somebody else was doing it. And that hasn't been confirmed or denied, or people claim they don't know anything about it. In fact, the CIA says they no longer use that stuff, which I think is a bunch of BS. I'm sure that they are still using, if they're not using that, it's because they have something better. And that's just all there is to that. Now this is interesting. This was in 2001. They had phone conversations that when they asked about alleged terrorist tries to Deutsche Bank and potential pre-attack CIA trade monitoring via Promise, Treasury Department spokesman Rob Nichols remarked, "This is clearly an interesting line of question regarding conflicts of interest." What does that mean? This is clearly an interesting line of questioning. Yeah. How come you guys aren't out all over this? However, news searches indicate that no member of Congress has publicly questioned whether wealthy terrorist-connected Saudi nationals participated in the private client operations of Deutsche Bank Alex Brown. Osama bin Laden and almost all the alleged 9/11 hijackers, I believe it was 18 out of 20 or 17 out of 20, something like that, are of Saudi nationality. Also, no member of Congress expressed public interest in asking Krongard about whether or not the CIA affected real-time pre-attack trade monitoring using Promise software at any location. Well, and even if they did, the CIA probably wouldn't let them answer. Remember, the number 3 guy at the CIA was once a high-ranking person at the Krongard Trading, and he was also, has a lot of influence with Deutsche Bank, and so I doubt that any of that would ever go anywhere due to Mr. Buzzy Krongard. Okay, so he's the guy that is kind of a key person. I talked briefly in chat with Eric Dubin, who's been on the show before and has the News Doctors site, and Eric was all over this in 2001, 2002, and he said he spent about 5,000 hours researching this, and I believe it. He's very thorough on this sort of things, and he said there were just so many things pointing at Deutsche Bank, the Alex Brown brokerage, House and Buzzy Krongard. He says there's just so much evidence out there and nothing was ever done about it. It never got past asking questions. There was Stonewall at every conceivable place. And let's see. Down here, this is what was reported by Flacco and Rupert. It says Krongard's current lofty intelligent community position, combined with his prior leadership of financial institutions allegedly connected to terrorist hijacked bank accounts, suspicious United Airlines option contracts, and private banking, is so controversial that it has not yet sparked any official investigation. That said, the evidence is substantial enough to potentially expose the prior knowledge issue if Congress chooses to act. Now, that's the important thing. If Congress chooses to act. So, there's evidence here of some really bad stuff happening. And I remember back to the Clinton administration when Bill Clinton was in office. All of a sudden they started an investigation on crimes that occurred while he was governor of Arkansas, as much as 10 years prior. The Whitewater investigations, where they had kind of a phony real estate deal, and there's a lot of graft and corruption and stuff going on. There's also a bunch of people end up dead, and it was quite entertaining to watch C-SPAN for a while. Although I have to say that I think it was just a lot of people running for office. They're the politicians that were on those commissions. They just when the camera was on them, they'd make sure they sounded very just oozing with integrity and honesty and everything else, and just berating all these people who are coming forward to confess to things they'd done wrong, and these things were implicating Bill Clinton, but yet nobody ever, even though they were just picking on these people, they never ever had the guts to do much for Bill Clinton. And finally, he was impeached by the House for lying about Monica Lewinsky and his relationship with her. And that's just pathetic. He had crimes that he should have gone to prison for. They're that serious. And he got impeached for, semen stain on a blue dress. It's just pretty incredible. I can't believe that that's where everybody's interest, and it's like copying to a lesser, I guess. That's what they call it. I even think that they may have made up that whole thing, because they didn't want him to go down with the whole Whitewaters thing. And so they found out something else they could focus everybody's attention on that was, something that, no, everyone's going to forgive him for, because, gosh. Of course, then you look at Monica Lewinsky and say, seriously? Gee whiz. So, it wasn't really that believable. So anyway, there's a lot of work that was done back in 2001, 2002 on this issue, and it's all still there on the internet. You can go and look it up online and read it for yourself. But I think the real thing that you want to check out is this book that's coming out. It came out today on Kindle, so if you have Kindle, you can download it. And it's going to come out, I think, Monday, possibly tomorrow. No, I think it was Monday at Barnes & Noble. Anyway, if you go there next week at Barnes & Noble and major bookstores, it's probably going to be there. And again, the title of the book is When Money Dies, and the guy's name is Tim Rickert. I think I got that all right. And they have a review of it up on Amazon, but I noticed they didn't have any mention of this in the review. And then Max Kaiser was talking about this on his Russia Today, on his little podcast thing, and that got taken down off of YouTube. So I have a feeling there's a push on by some people to keep this out of the news. I think they're trying to sweep this under the rug. I think that they're trying to squash this. So I'm going to try and, I don't have a Kindle, but my mom does. I'm going to try and get her to purchase that so that I wonder if they can erase those from your Kindles once you have them. Well, I think that if it's stored in there, I think it doesn't.
I think they can. I'm pretty sure that they can.
I'm going to try and find some way to get a hard copy if I can, because I have a feeling this is something that could disappear real quick.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they want us all using Kindles.
And if it does disappear, I tell you, that's proof that this guy is guilty, and that there's people in the CIA that should be hanging.
They'll make some kind of a story about it being a copyright issue.
Now that's kind of the end of that part of the story, but there's some other things that Drew and I thought about when we talked about this. Oh, thank you, Hunt. You can get them on iBooks then. If it's on Kindle, it'll be on iBooks and stuff like that. You can just type in the answer. I'll just read it later. But, okay. Remember that recently there's been a real, rash of banker suicides or banker deaths, including there was a new one we posted today on our Facebook page about a lawyer for the, JP Morgan real estate, division. I think he worked in, bankruptcies. So he would be reclaiming their property out of bankruptcies. But he was riding his bike and he was hit by a car and killed. There were no skid marks or anything else. The accident, I mean, he was hit full force by the car, leading me to believe that it conceivably was not an accident. I mean, it could have been an accident, but and if it wasn't an accident, they certainly wouldn't have been leaving skid marks. If it was, if it was an accident, that'd probably been what you'd see. It's possible that the guy just didn't see him and ran into him. You can't say it isn't possible, but it's probably much more likely in this instance to have been a purposeful act than an accident. And certainly, so that's just another person being waxed or being greased. I think this brings the total to 13 or 14 in the last couple of months. Now, I want you guys to know that the CIA is really good at intelligence gathering. They just don't tell you what they gather, but they know a lot more than they let on. And I'm sure they knew what's going to happen before 9/11 happened. They know that this book is being written. They know that they know the people that know the facts. They know people that know information that can put people behind bars. And these people are being contacted by the person writing this book, putting it together. And even though he may be meeting them in secure locations, they know he's meeting with them. And suddenly they start ending up hanging. They ended up, getting shot with a nail gun 9 times before falling off an embankment and tumbling to their death. They fall off bridges. They jump off of buildings. This sounds a lot like the way people were dying during the Clinton administration. And there was over 50 people that were associated, that were called Friends of Bill, that died mysteriously. And then a lot of them were probably legitimate deaths. I mean, some people die from day to day, but how many of you have 50, 55 people? I was somewhere in that range. I think it may have been 54, 55 people. How many of you know that many people that have died in an 8-year period of time? Under things like they're falling out of windows, airplane crashes, running into trains, all sorts of weird accidents. I mean, they're all supposedly accidental deaths. And, it just seemed like it was one of those things that's just hard to accept as possible that many accidental deaths could happen to all of these people that were associated to Bill Clinton. But apparently it did not grab the national attention because, the people that were the Clinton apologists made sure that they had a plausible explanation for everything. And anybody that started to link these things together were viciously derided as, conspiracy theorists out with an agenda to achieve, and they had no regard for facts. They just wanted to destroy people's lives. And, So they kind of shut him up by just all those types of things. Anyway, so we're only at maybe, we'll say 13. It's at least 13 bankers or people related to the banking industry that have perished. This other guy that we posted, he was a lawyer, but he was a lawyer for a bank, so we're calling him a bankster too. And I remember back to last year when there was a reporter down in Los Angeles, and it's because I was thinking about his name, and it was in my head, and now it's gone. Michael something. I'm horrible at names. But he was in a deadly car accident. His car exploded and then ran into a tree, in Los Angeles about 4:00 in the morning. He was a reporter that had been embedded in a military operation in Afghanistan and had written some.
You're talking about Hastings.
Michael Hastings, right. And he'd written articles that were very damning to General McChrystal, and McChrystal kind of lost and that was the end of his military career for all intents and purposes, because of things that Hastings wrote. And he was currently supposedly working on something that was tied to the CIA at the time of his death. And I'm thinking, tied to the CIA. This book is going to be tied to the CIA. There's a lot of bankers that are dying that maybe gave information, the guy that wrote this book. People who could corroborate what's in that book. They're certainly dying. I don't know if this is really something that's there or not, because we have limited resources here. We work on our own money. We don't have a lot of it. And so that's what we do. We come out here and we just have ideas. We think about things and we try and use logic. Say, well, how is this connected to anything that's going on right now? And these things are popping up in my mind. I'm saying, well, yeah, that's possible. It's possible if these people were potentially going to be executed for treason, because certainly I think if they were that involved in stuff that they were actually trying to make a fortune off the deaths of fellow Americans and knew this event was going to happen and did nothing to stop it because they wanted to make the money, I don't think anyone is going to cry any tears for their loss of their life or for their execution or whatever. So knowing that their lives may be at stake may be enough reason for someone to be desperate enough to go out and start greasing people who could either put them behind bars for the rest of their life or put them 6 feet under. And they certainly have a motive then to be doing all this stuff. And because this guy is number 3 guy at the CIA, he certainly has the opportunity and the ability. He has the opportunity to engage people to carry this stuff out. He probably has people that are loyal to him that would do this. Desert Hawk says hard to prove. You are exactly right. It's impossible to prove. For me to prove. There are people, though, that are investigators that do this for a living that know how to get this information. They know how to there are people still out there that have the information. The information's in this book. And it has to be confirmed. You have to go and find the leads that this person had. You have to find the people that are in the footnotes that he cites. And maybe they're sources that he's trying to keep private, trying to protect their identities. I don't think it's working. And the fact that Max Kaiser's things got taken down, I think Alex Jones stuff is still up, but the Max Kaiser stuff got taken down. That's telling me that maybe, and if the Alex Jones stuff gets taken down, it's going to be alarm bells should start going off. So keep your eyes on this, everybody. I hope I am completely wrong, and I hope that all this is just something to get people talking about stuff, and none of it's true. Because I don't like the idea of having to think that there are people that think so little of us that they would do this for some money, that they would engage in this kind of thing so they could have a conflict, so they could go to war and enrich themselves through the death and destruction of 9/11. That's just a horrible thought to think that there are people that live on things like that think that's okay. And I don't want to think that there are people that exist like that actually have influence over my life. I also have to be a realist to know that that's possible. And so, like I said, just keep an eye on all this, and we're gonna keep an eye on it. We told you that we were not going to let Michael Hastings' death go away, because it's still unanswered. And this also explains a lot about the sudden reversal of Michael Hastings' wife, of somebody who was going to find the people responsible for this, to all of a sudden she was just warm and fuzzy. Oh yes, Michael, he was just driving too fast, and it was just the car got away from him, and all of a sudden she wasn't so interested in finding out those responsible. And I think someone got to her. They explained to her what her husband was investigating, and she didn't want to know any more than what they just told her. And it says, this information can't be made public. This information, if you want to keep on living your life, you better shut up. We're monitoring everything you say and do. You utter one word, and you're as good as dead. Now, they don't want to go on keep killing too many people, because that calls attention to them. But I bet you they're killing the people that have talked. And I think they ought to go back and start looking at people who may have talked to Michael Hastings. I think that's really important. Yes. And Drew sent me a message. Remember Breitbart. There's somebody else. You remember he was at the CPAC, and he says, we're working on a story right now that's going to bring this whole thing down. Like a week later, he's dead. I am sure that these are smoking guns, and that this story was never addressed. Just like Building 7, they never gave us answers that fit what's going on. And Drew, that's okay with me. We can have one. But they never explained how these buildings would fall as though they're a demolition, and how they never could explain all the physical evidence that disputed the lame theories that they put out in these great scientific magazines like Popular Mechanics. Are you kidding me? Popular Mechanics. I remember listening to Glenn Beck up there and say what a great magazine, what a great scientific magazine Popular Mechanics was. And I'm going, are you kidding me? That was the last time I listened to Glenn Beck. Now, that guy was, he's a paid for stooge. And this is obvious stuff that a high school physics student should be able to look at and say, well, that can't be true. This is the same kind of stuff. The financial information that was just stonewalled. There's all these questions being asked and no answers ever. None. And the stories that they do float out there to try and explain it don't make any sense. Just like the physical evidence for the towers in building number 7. All these deaths, and we're going to start making a list, and when we get it done, we'll post it, and then we'll update it as it gets updated, and you guys can keep coming back to our web page or our Facebook page and getting copies of it and start passing it around. We're not going to let this die until somebody proves to us that this theory doesn't hold water either. And then we'll say, we're sorry. But we think if people had been more forthcoming and more truthful at the beginning, nobody would have been led down this road. And certainly what they've told us cannot possibly be the truth. So I'm tired of being lied to, and I'm calling my congressman, and I want to know what he's going to do about it. And he has somebody running against him in this primary. And I'm going to start calling all the talk radio shows in Oregon. I'm going to start asking, are you guys calling your congressman and asking him about this? Because this is kind of a big deal. And I'm going to start calling the radio station in Congressman Walden's hometown. That's his radio station. I say, are you guys keeping this story off the air, or you're not talking about this because you're trying to protect him? Is that what passes for journalism in the Dalles, in a station owned by the congressman? He also has communications stations in Bend. Call them. This is a story. This stuff. If you are out there in any of these areas where you're impacted by these communications stations, you should be calling up and asking about this. Yeah, yeah. What's going on here? How come you guys aren't on this? How come you aren't reporting this? How come it's your duty to tell the people that this stuff hasn't been properly addressed and it hasn't been, they're left so many questions unanswered that it's just giving rise to all sorts of speculation about things. And some of the speculation is probably wrong. I mean, that's the nature of speculation. You just don't know the facts, and so you start thinking, well, this could be, this could be, this could be. And they can't all be right. But the fact that all these people tied to the banking industry are turning up dead, and the reporters who are working on stories that maybe involve the CIA are turning up dead, and that the reporter's wife, who was going to spend the rest of her life in finding the people responsible for his death and making them accountable, the fact that she suddenly isn't going to do that anymore, and kind of the fact that Max Keiser's stuff got taken off of YouTube, those are things that bother me. They trouble me. So that's where I am today. By the way, I want everybody out there to know that neither Drew nor I are suicidal. We are very happy when we're around other people. We enjoy them very much. I'm very happily married. I have a very nice life. I have a lot to live for. I'm not anybody who would ever consider or contemplate suicide, ever. I'm just always kind of taking life on head on, and that's how I do it. And I sometimes you crash a little bit, but you just get up and brush yourself off and take it on again. And usually I've been successful in a lot of things I've done in my life, and I have no reason to be depressed, or I don't take any drugs except an occasional cocktail on Friday night. That's it. So I'm clean. Drew is one of the happiest people I know. He's always laughing, jovial. He went through a pretty tough time about a year and a half ago, and he just bucked up and got it done. He gets harassed by the authorities. It just makes him more determined. So he's not a kind of a guy either. He's a very determined person. That's the reason we have this radio show. So, we're not that type. So if anything happens to either one of us, I want you guys have to pick up the flag and start carrying it yourself. I don't know if what I'm talking about is even possible. I'm not trying to be paranoid, because I'm not really afraid of these people. They're going to do what they're going to do, and that's just how life is. But I think the only way to protect yourself is to come out and show all your cards. If you pretend like you know something you don't, I've told you everything I know tonight. That's all I know. I'd like to know a lot more. And if any of you know somebody that has information and want to contact us, they can get a hold of us. They might want to do it through the mail, snail mail, because I think anything electronic is monitored. You don't want to call us. You don't want to send them an email or anything like that. But you can probably send something to, I think we have a mailing address on our website, don't we, Drew?
Yeah, our email address is...
No email. I think snail mail. I think they should better do it.
Oh, snail mail?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not giving out a snail mail address.
Well, I don't want to give one out either. I don't want my mail, but maybe you can meet us at a parking garage somewhere sometime, and we can talk about stuff. I'll just leave it at that. But if you have information, so it's the safest way to have that information is to tell everybody everything that you know, and then they can't do anything more to you. They can only use you as an example to someone else they're trying to keep quiet, and they've already done that, a dozen times. They've made their point. Another person's not going to make it a bigger threat. So, I think it just calls more attention to the people doing the crime. So I think at this point, the safest thing to do is just to tell everybody everything you know. So if there's somebody in the CIA listening to this tonight and you know something about this and you're afraid, man, you got to find somebody and tell this to. Send a letter to Alex Jones. Send a letter to Max Keiser. Send a letter to the guy that wrote the book, Tim Rickard. Rickard, yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna be bringing on Miner Dave here in just a minute or two. He's got some new news for us. We always love to have him on. While we're waiting for him to get hooked up, I just want to go over that other story again about the 35,000 voters in North Carolina that had the identical first, last name, and the identical date of birth. I think that's just, all those people were born on the same day of the year, and in the same year, and their parents all had the same last name, and they all had the same first name. That must have looked really weird in the local newspapers to have all those people born on the same day.
Incredible.
Same name.
Completely incredible.
It's incredible. I'm amazed that no one noticed that before, that so many people born on that same day in the birth announcements would have the same name.
Wow.
And I can't believe they say this is an indication of voter fraud. It's proof. What? I can't believe what's happened to our language. I mean, this is incredible that someone could say that this is an indication. It's like that. I mean, anybody can even imagine that was possible is like insane. I just can't imagine that. The fact that 35,000 people in North Carolina were born on the same day would be incredible coincidence. But to have the same first and last name. Oh, look at this. John Smith had a baby boy, Billy Smith. Oh, look at this. This John Smith had a baby boy, Billy Smith. And look, this one had a baby girl. This is also John Smith, and it was Billy Smith. And yeah. Oh, it's Rickards. I think it's Rickerts, Rickards, like that. Yeah. So, and I'm hoping that this guy's book it really does open up some floodgates, and it changes how things are done in this country, and it shines a light on some evil and corruption and sends a lot of bad people to prison or to the gas chamber, executes people. Incredible. It's not just what happened on 9/11. It's the wars that resulted from that, and the thousands of young, our best and brightest who were killed in these wars, the hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the Middle East that have died, the people who lived there that have died because of these wars, because of this, the terrible disruption of our economy that's happened because of this. This is just a crime against humanity, and the people that are responsible need to rot in hell. Okay. That's the end of my editorial. Miner Dave, are you there?
Miner Dave's not here yet.
Oh.
Just a moment, and I will pass him in.
Okay, I'm not a very good singer. Oh, there he goes.
Hello.
There he is.
Yes.
Dave, how are you doing?
I like to say thank you, Drew. Thank you, Chuck, for taking me to see Jordan. It was greatly inspirational because that night I couldn't sleep. So I poked around the internet and I figured out my case. I found out I got a 52-page report from the University of Yale written on trust law. It's definitive. It's from their law journal. It explains it as college and professors would explain it. Then I got enforcement of a trustee written by a lawyer that posted it for paralegals to use, like me. And it was the enforcement of a trust. And so I wrote a motion. I wrote a 99-page motion, but I only wrote one page tying all the other documents together, and I'm asking the court in a motion to bring forward the law of the grant. In this case, this is the first grant the United States ever gave, and they made an international treaty with it. And a treaty just means a contract, because they were advertising in Europe for minors to come here, and if they declared the intentions of becoming a citizen, they would get the claim, a 20-acre claim per individual, or 160 with 8 people. And so this is how the cities of the West were formed initially. They were the first governments here. Anyways, this is about bringing forward the law of the grant and the trustee. So then I made another motion that the Inspector General of the Department of Interior, BLM, be appointed the trustee. Because they're lawyers, they're the enforcement, and the BLM has a land court, to adjudicate these things administratively. And as a minor, any minor that was having a problem with anybody, it wouldn't matter who it is, the Inspector General would be prosecuting the case. And he would have his first duty of loyalty would be to the grantee, or the more modern word, beneficiary. Because the trustee has a duty to loyalty to the beneficiary. Absolute international law. All countries recognize it. And so I filed that. And then I found something else working around, because that was a lot of work. And it's a lot of money to print it up. It cost me $75 for all the copies. So now I have to do another 48 pages that I got to get printed up. And it's the covenants of the trust, the 1872 and 1860 and 1870 mining laws of the valuable mineral estate. And I'm filing that as a supplemental to my motion, and that completes my brief. By the way, it's definitive. If I was to submit this to a college as a thesis, they give me a PhD.
Well, the fact that you understand a lot that's in this book anyway is kind of a testament to your legal knowledge, which is, I think, is in some areas surpasses almost all lawyers.
Well, the reason why is because they belong to the bar. They're limited on what they can argue by contract.
Yes.
I'm not a member of the bar, and I'm a minor at law. Now, when you look up minor at law, they give you the minor's law, and it's a formula on how you do it mathematically. Find where you're looking for to look for a hard rock claim. It's a mathematical formula. But this is not a new term, because it was been recognized that we were local governments. At the time, because we were the only local governments out here, some of them were formed on the East Coast and moved out here, but they were originally formed and they moved as a government when they moved. And the government, they were allowed to do that because they bought claims out here. And since they could form the government wherever they were at, for their jurisdiction to get there. And it gave them immunity as they traveled through the country for not to be charged with trespass. There was immunity for being charged with trespass on government lands. It was your easement, egress, and egress rights. And that was just the beginning of them. And they were ruled because Congress said to the young men of the East, go west and make your fortune. And that was an invitation to go out on government land. And Congress was forced by the Supreme Court to make that law because they invited him onto the land. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have enforcement of the trust. And I get to split off the public-private partnership because this is not just about the mining laws. This is about the public-private partnership and my red light ticket. Not only have I argued immunity, but let's set that aside. I'm arguing because I filed a motion and I got approval for informis papis for my appeal on my red light. And I filed a motion to stay the city's orders and to stay the hearing until, because I'm suing the city because they're in the public-private partnership with with the Forest Service through SoReady. By the way, there's more cities that'll be coming on. This is going to grow exponentially. But I got a little phone call the other day from somebody that was eating lunch at Far East, and he heard two lawyers talking about this, that if I win this case, it becomes precedent, and they're already figuring up the cost of what the city's going to owe me and what they're going to have. And then now they have to calculate up how much they'll have to refund on all the red lights. At least they're worried about it, and they're trying to figure away an argument. But in the court we're going to, they can't give specious arguments. They have to argue to my accounting. And I've asked for an audit of accounting. And so that is now beginning. There's going to be an audit of the public-private partnerships, and it'll be all of them, all the nonprofits, all the profit companies, everything, all the banks, everything. There'll be an audit, and it'll have to be done by the Inspector General of the BLM, and with prosecuting authority to put people in prison. And it'll exclude Eric Holder because he's a named defendant.
Yes, it'd be amazing if our own Minor Dave was the person who brought Eric Holder down. That would be incredible. Actually, I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing because there's a certain irony to the fact.
It is humorous, by the way.
That
they made me. They made me the man I am because, see.
Yes, they did.
They were abusive. Every time I turned around, I had Mr. Don Ross. Now, he's a likable guy. Me and my friend call him Elmer Fudd because he was always chasing the rascal rabbit, and that was Marcus, my friend Marcus. He could be anywhere, and he could be watching Mr. Don Ross, Elmer Fudd, Ranger Elmer Fudd, and he wouldn't see him because he was too fat, and he couldn't move around. Most of these guys
Marcus,
get out of the car.
I'll explain to you guys who are listeners. Marcus is, he's about 5'6", 5'7", about 100.
Right. And he's built like a shit house.
160 pounds, and it's all muscles. He looks like he could.
He looks like like the Italian side of the family. He is. He looks like a Roman god.
He looks like he could.
A Roman statue.
Yeah, something like that. He's very heavily, and I wouldn't say heavily muscled, but he's
strong as an ox.
No fat on him.
Yeah, he eats like he eats a lot.
Yeah, and so he could. Well, when he goes out hiking, he could go up the side of a hill that like a mountain goat, and these other guys, they take about 4 or 5 steps. They're in danger of a heart attack. So,
right, that's the key thing. By the way, I can do the same thing. I'm just older than Marcus.
Yeah,
I'm slower than him.
He was nice when I was out there hiking out the woods with him. He was nice, and he would slow down and let me catch up with him. But I was having to kind of make sure my dogs were okay. I made a mistake and brought those dogs.
Taking you. That's Billy Goat country.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, he took you the easy way. He likes to take the hard way sometimes.
No, I bet it isn't that hard for him.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so that's what I just had to give you guys, that visual image of somebody who's just like think of a gymnast, Olympic gymnast. He has that kind of a build.
Well, he played in high school and in college. He played football.
Mm-hmm. I imagine he was probably pretty good.
He played for the University of Auburn.
Yeah, as a
defensive player.
Yeah. He probably weighed a little bit more than he probably.
No, he's always weighed 160 pounds. They can't figure out why he can't gain any weight. It's just he's very hyper. He's a guy that never stops moving, ever.
Yeah, well.
And he's a good friend.
Yeah, he
stuck by me, and I'm not an easy person to stick by.
I know. I mean, I realized that he had a good friendship with you, and he got mad at you for your dog eating his dinner that day when I was out there. But
I can help that.
He let it go. He was mad for about a minute and a half, and then so not much I can do about it.
He just blows it off, and then it's over with.
Yeah. I would have been mad for a longer period of time than he was.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Anyway, so this is good news, and I wanted to tell you also that I knew that you were very inspired by Jordan.
It was a hell of that guy. He got me to, what he did was it got me to relax because I've been working too hard, and it let me go have some fun, and I had a very good time. And by the way, it seems like everybody knows me down there, and it's hard because people know me, and it's hard for me to know everybody because the crowds are getting too big.
What I wanted to tell you is that I told this information to Jordan, and he was really excited that both you and Rabbit were so pumped up after the concert, that he had given you guys so much inspiration.
Well, you can tell him from me that it allowed me to relax, and then you can tell him the story I told you.
Yeah, I will. In fact, I'll tell him it's at the end of the show. He can, just go to the last 15 minutes and he can hear your story. And it's
Anyways, I wanted to say one more thing.
Sure.
That if you go to Google, right now I can't add anybody in, but it says I have 1,056 followers and over 70,000 views. I don't have it on my YouTube yet, but if you go to David Everest, Minor Dave 279, that's my UL for my Google page, and then all the links are on that to get to that, and you might be able to even find the map if you click on my address to my claim. I drew directions.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'll try and get some links for you, and we'll post them in our Facebook page.
If you look on the satellite, you'll see the trailers they took.
Yeah.
The trailers are right there. That's an old photograph, but I love it because it was when my trailers were there.
It's evidence.
Yeah, it's evidence that my trailers were there and they took them.
Government theft.
By the way, I got it right off the satellite. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Google's wonderful.
So our music's going to be starting up pretty soon. We want to thank everybody for listening to this tonight. And
please look at my YouTube. I could use the views.
Yeah, and I hope everybody has a good week, and come back next week. We'll have some more interesting stuff. I'm sure there's always something happening. Drew, thanks for being here tonight, and thank you to Jules.